Welcome to English 1120, our Introduction to Grammar course. In this video, we're going to talk about standard English and how language standards can have positive or negative benefits. First, we want to define a standard and maybe talk a little bit about how it's established, and then we'll go over briefly some advantages and disadvantages to having a language standard. So what is standard English? Well, we could say that it's a mutually intelligible form of the language that speakers of different dialects can all understand. And many languages will have regional, social variations like we've talked about, but they may have a standard that unites all of them. And that one's accepted that when you want to talk to someone from another region or another social group, using the standard is the best one to ensure that you're more likely to be understood. So there isn't really any one standard of English. We've talked about global English or international English, but even those is not an official standard. There's just ways that we might make choices about how we use grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation in order to make our speech more intelligible to others. But we could say that there are maybe groups of standards of English that fit different regions of the world, like what we might consider standard American English, standard British English. And even that, there's different standards for different parts of that country, standard Australian. So we don't really have one standard English for the whole world. But the idea of the standard there is that there is changes we could make to our particular dialect to make us more easily understood by others who speak other dialects. So how is a standard determined? Well, really, this is an issue often about power and money. If the government is in a particular city within a particular language community, then it's likely that the dialect that is spoken in that city will become the standard for the country. Not because that particular form of the language is any more linguistically superior or better or clearer. It may not be any of those things. It may just be because that's where the money and the power is. And so that becomes the one that's used in things like media, official documents, written documents, and other things. And then that sort of spreads out. So when something is chosen as a standard, we should never be thinking that it's somehow superior or better. It just, through some circumstances, often having to do with issues of power and money, it became the one that is more widely accepted as the standard. And that's it. So there are some advantages to having a standard. It can make people from different groups more easily intelligible to one another. I put a picture here of a school that I taught at when I was a teacher in China. And when I was first teaching at the school, I didn't know much Chinese, really hardly any. And I was learning along my way. And I asked one of the other teachers at the school, who was an English speaker, to explain to me some of the signs that I saw in the hallways of the school. And I could pick out that the signs had some symbols I knew, but others that I didn't. And what she explained was that those signs are there to remind the students at the school that they must speak Putonghua, which is the common language. So, which is to say, the dialect of Chinese that's spoken in Beijing, the capital city. Now, almost all of my students come from rural towns in a rural province, and they spoke different dialects than what is the national standard. But they were told that when you're at school, you speak the national standard so that everyone, teachers and students, can easily understand one another. And so there's an advantage to that, right? We want everyone at the school to feel like they're included in all conversations. And when we speak different languages in a social environment, people can feel excluded and maybe worried that maybe they're being talked about, or things that are important to them, they're not have access to that information because they don't speak the particular dialect that's being spoken. So there is that unifying aspect of requiring people to use a common standard. And that's a big advantage. But at the same time, that's almost a disadvantage. So I think of all those students at that school who really have not grown up speaking the national standard. And so not only do they have to learn the things they need to learn at school, but they're having to express themselves in a dialect that is not native to them. And that's limiting their ability to think and communicate. And really, dialect and language is so tied to identity and culture that it's almost like telling them, you can't keep on to your identity. You have to adopt this new uniform national identity. So really that's, when we talk about disadvantages, that's one of the problems with establishing a dialect, is it saying that that dialect matters more than the other dialects. And that's simply not true. It shouldn't matter more, but it may have more power. One of the other problems associated with standards is that they may start to push out diversity. And so we're losing diversity, not only linguistic diversity, but cultural diversity, as we limit people's ability to use these different languages and dialects. And so when we lose a language, we're not just losing the words and the grammar, we're losing all of the cultural knowledge that's embedded in that language and how those words and language and grammar is used. So we need to be really careful when we promote the idea of standards, because there are some advantages, that we don't say that a standard should replace other forms of a language or other languages. And this is a big issue in English language learning that I'm a part of. The idea that, yes, we want to help people learn English because English is a language of opportunity. It can help them connect with people around the world. It can open up career and educational opportunities. But many people then think, well, let's just learn English. Let's not worry about other languages because those languages just don't provide those same opportunities. Let's just focus on English. And suddenly English may become a subtractive language rather than an additive language. We don't want English to replace other languages. We just want it to be another language that can be used in addition to native languages, local dialects, and other attempts to become multilingual. So standards can be very helpful, but we do need to be careful about them, and that we don't allow a standard to overpower other groups or to tell other dialects that they are somehow inferior and that they're invalid. This is an issue that happens even in the United States with standard English. People who speak other varieties, social or regional varieties of English, are often felt like they're not good enough if they don't speak a more standard variety, a more academic variety, or in some cases really a more white middle or upper middle class variety. And it's simply not true. All those dialects are valid. And so there is more of a push within United States culture and all world cultures to try to raise the status and the value, recognize the value of regional and social dialects, that we ought to give more place in our society for this linguistic variation. And let's have more books and more media that uses other forms of the language, so that all of us don't get pigeonholed into just the one standard dialect, that we can become proficient at understanding and appreciating a variety of dialects. So that was our goal today, is to talk about the English language standard and then some of its advantages and disadvantages. And I hope this has helped you see the value in not only respecting a standard, but also questioning the standard and really encouraging linguistic variety and diversity.